Hi, fellow Django developers. Hezekiah here from alwaysdjango.com, where we discuss interesting Django topics that helps you grow, improve as a Django developer. If that sounds interesting, like, subscribe, share this video with anyone you feel will find this video interesting. So, in the last tutorial where we discussed Django class-based API view, right? Where we had this was what we had in the last tutorial, right? After the last tutorial, and we created this API view, right? So we were able to create this API view, make get request and post request, right? So if you don't know about that tutorial, I'll leave a link to it in the description. You can go and check it out. So in that tutorial, I mentioned that we'll be looking at Django generic API view, right? So while thinking about it, I just got up to make the video and I realized that we have not discussed Django serializers, right? So Django serializers, that's obviously more important, not more important, but we need to learn Django serializers before we learn Django Rest Framework generic views, right? So what are serializers? Serializers are simply, they are like data passers, right? They pass your data, right? So you know how in your front end, right, Django Rest Framework is used to develop APIs that will be used in your front end, right? So your front end applications are usually JavaScript, right? So let's say React, Vue, or Angular, or what have you. Sorry for the noise. So React, Angular, or Vue, right? So those JavaScript frameworks do not understand our Python classes, right? Our Python classes, our Python objects, right? So serializers serve as parsers, right? As in between guys to change your Python classes, Python objects to JSONs, right? To JavaScript standard object notation, if I'm right. Then change JSON, that's when they are coming from the front end, into Python classes and objects, right? So hopefully that was the description was clear enough. If it wasn't, we'll look at it now and it will be helpful, right? So first thing that we do is that we go to an application, right? So I go to this base application right here. I go to this application, I create a new file called serializers.py. So this class will house all the serializers we need for this application, right? So after doing that, we say from REST framework we import serializers, right? So there are different there are like basically two types of serializers that we'll be looking at in this tutorial, right? There are more, but there are basically two that we'll be looking at. The first one is a normal serializer, the second one is the model serializer. So I'll leave a comment here. Let's say normal serializers. I think they have the hyperlink serializers and other types of serializers, right? So we'll be looking at then model serializers, right? So the first one is a normal serializer. So to create serializers, they behave like forms, right? Like Django forms. You know how Django forms have the class meta, have you can declare like fields and stuffs like that, right? So that's how serializers behave. So let's say we name this test serializer, right? So let's say we name this test serializer. So after naming it test serializer, we inherit from serializers.serializer, right? So from these serializers here, we inherit from serializer, right? So in the next tutorial, in this tutorial, one will also look at model serializers. If you place dots here, so you see we have where is it? We have the hyperlink serializer, hyperlinked related field serializer, hyperlink serializer. We have the model serializer, right? And we have the normal serializer, right? So at a Python class we add this code, right? So like I said, this behaves like forms, right? So if you don't know Django Forms, I'll also leave a link to it in the description so that you can go and look at it, right? So forms, what do forms have? They have fields, right? So Serializers also has fields. Let's say we want to create a book, right? A book form, for instance. You want to create a book form, you have something like the name and the description, right? So let's go with name right now, which is equal to, then the field we say serializers dot, with type of field we say character field, which is the char field. Then we say description is equal to serializers dot, do we have text? No. So the same thing with character fields, right? So this is a serializer now, right? So this is an absolute serializer in our application, right? So what's the basic thing about serializers? The basic thing about serializers, like we said, is that they act as parsers, right? They change JSON to Python objects, Python classes, and from Python classes and objects to JSON, right? So in this tutorial we will not basically be using Postman or maybe using the browser. We'll basically be using our terminal right here to test what we have here, right? So if we come to the terminal, if you know about Python, the Django shell, right? Django shell, where you can import stuffs and play around with Python. So this will be, if you don't know about it, this will be a very interesting place to learn about it, right? So we close this one off and let me make this terminal bigger, right? So this can enter. So from here, if we say Python manage.py normal Django command, you say shell, right? So this will whip up a Python shell for you, but this Python shell, from this Python shell you will be able to import packages and modules and play around with your Django application, right? So hopefully it takes a little bit of time, 5 seconds mostly, but my system is lagging, so I don't know, might take more time like it's doing, right? So as it's doing that, so I said that will be important. So from this application right now, from this our application, okay, so it's open here. So let me close this back. So from here you can see, here you can do whatever you want to do. You can interact with your models, you can import stuffs, right? So this is your normal Django, your normal Python shell, right? But here you have access to your Django application and you can import stuff. Let's say for instance let's say we import the let's say from Django dot utils, let's import the time zone module, time zone, right? So then let me print my time zone dot now, right? So you can see my time right here, my current time. So this is basically like a shell where you can interact with Django, right? Where you can interact with your application, you can import Python packages and what have you, right? So what we're going to do right now is that we are going to import this serializer class. We are going to import this serializer class and we are going to play around with it, right? Then when we make a model serializer, we also make it and play around with it also, right? So, and hopefully that is how we are going to learn, right? So let's say the package we want to import is, we want to import from this base package, we want to say we want to import serializers, then from serializer we import the test serializer class, right? So what we say is, we say from base, right? Base, which is this app, which is this package that we created here, dot serializers, right? We import test serializer, right? So you can see hopefully it imports it. You can see that we said from this base package, right? From this base package right here, go to my serializers, go to my serializers file. If you go to my serializers file, I want you to import this test class, right? Which is what we have done here, so I'm getting a little bit of message, but this is my personal system problem. We have imported the serializers right here, this test serializer right here. Don't mind the message I'm getting here. This is my personal system problem, and I'll resolve it, right? So I didn't remember it before making this video. I would have resolved it before making it, so but I'm sorry. So but don't mind this, the serializer has been imported, right? So serializers, there are few things that we need to learn about serializers, and like here we'll just touch up on it. Then in the model serializers, that will be where we get to like appreciate it more, and use the save method, use the data method and stuff like that. So let's say for instance we want to create, let's say we have this JSON. Let's say data is equal to an object, right? So let's say the object has name, and the name of the book is test book, right? And the description is this is the description, right? So this is our data right here, right? This is our object, right? So if we want to convert it to JSON, we can say test serializer. Let's create an instance of test serializer. Then we say data is equal to data, right? So if we say this and say test serializer dot data, so so test serializer, I'm getting a little bit of error, right? So what we're going to do is that I'll create a model serializer. With a model serializer, that's when we'll have to appreciate this more. So let's say if we go to this base package, you have this model, and we don't have a model already. So let's say let's create a book model. Let's say models dot model, right? Then it has a name. If you don't know about models, please go and check it out. Max length. Obviously this is not about model, this is just max description is equal to models dot, let me make this a text field so that I don't have the maximum length. Then just because, let me return the self dot name. So this is just prep work. I should have done this before now. So this is just prep work, just creating the model that will serve in our database, will save to our database, and so continue from there. I'm sorry if you have to see this. I think it's possible for me to maybe cut out this part of the video, but I don't think it's necessary, so that you get to see everything I'm doing and like get to appreciate the process and get to learn more, right? So let me start a command prompt here and make this deeper. Let me start my Python virtual environment. So if we start our Python virtual environment, after creating this model, if you know about Python models, you know that after creating models you have to run your migrations. After running you have to make your migrations. After making your migrations, you migrate them, right? So you commit them to the database. So I'll do that right quickly. Manage.py make migrations. Then after making migrations, you migrate, right? So after saying make migrations, you also say python manage.py migrate, right? So I think you should know this. If you are looking at this tutorial, I think you should also already understand the basics of Python, of Django, right? So python manage.py, I say migrate, right? So this will push our changes to the database, right? So we have a model, we have a database, we have committed it to the database, we have migrated and committed it to the database. So let me cross this out and let's continue, right? So let's create a book serializer, right? So this will be the text serializer. Let's create a book serializer. So a model serializer is easier and it's simpler. It's just like a model form in Django, right? So it's simpler, right? You don't have to declare your fields right here. The the serializer will look at the model. You give a reference to the serializer, and the serializer will look at the model and get its fields from there. So let me do the talk. Let me do the working. So let's say book serializer. If I can spell serializer. So say model, sorry, not models now. So serializers dot, not serializers anymore. You need the model serializer. So if we have the model serializer, the next thing is to add this class meta, right? So this class meta, what do we do here? So here is where we tell Django the model and the field, right? The model and the field. Basically, there are other things you can also tell it, but these are the basic things that you need. So which model are we talking about? You need the book model, right, which is this. Let me import this. So let me have Visual Studio Code help me out. So from the base package, which is this application, the models, we import this book, right? This book model which we just created, right? So we import that. Then after that, we say fields. Now these fields will contain a list, right? A Python list of the fields that we want to interact with in this model. So what are the fields we want to interact with? You need the name field and the description field, right? So with just this right now, maybe looking at this, you might think that maybe it's the same thing. The model serializer is the same thing with normal serializer. Why do I really need the model serializer? But I'm telling you, if maybe your model is bigger than just 2 fields, right, that's where you see the importance of a model serializer, right? So but if you don't want to name all these fields individually, right, you can just come here in a string, right, and say as a string you say underscore underscore all underscore underscore, right? So what Django will do, what this serializer will do, it will go to our model and just take all our fields and just like render them out here, right? So that's for that. So if we go back to our shell right here, and let's start our Python manage.py shell, right? So Python manage.py shell is started. Let's import the serializer we just created. So from base.serializers, we import the book serializer. If I got the spelling correctly, serializer, hopefully I got it. So we say b, let me just name it b, is equal to book serializer, right? So but before then, let's create our data. Let's say we want to create a new instance of a book to our database. You can say d is equal to, let's say data is equal to the name of, what is the name of the book? The name of the book is test, right? Then the description of the book is description. Why not? So description, the spelling is wrong, but who cares, right? So this is the data, right? This is the book that I want to save to the database. Now to do that, we can say b is equal to book serializer, right? So if we say book serializer, we'll pass in this data, right? So if we pass in this data has not really been saved, right? So before you save to the database, right, you need 2 methods. The first one is the save method, that's book.save, right, to the database. The second one is book.isValid, right? So what does these 2 methods do? Book.isValid simply checks your database, checks your data, right? This data right here, checks it, that's the data that you pass in here, checks it to make sure that it confides to the model, to the serializer validation scripts, right, to confirm that to make sure that it confides to the serializer scripts, right? So my terminal just went off. I think I'll just resolve that off screen and get back, right? So I'll just resolve my terminal going off and get back real quick, right? So welcome back. I resolved the issue and we can continue. So like I said, this book right here has two methods, right? So the save method, and there's not only two methods, but if you want to save this instance to the database, you require two methods: the save method and the isValid method. And the isValid method checks if this this serializer instance right here passes the serializer validation test, right? The serializer validation test, which this serializer, this model serializer, will go to our model right here and check the test that will have this maximum length and stuffs like that, right? So that is what the is valid, right? That's what the b dot is valid. If we say b dot is valid right now, and you can see if we don't call this is valid method, it will not allow us to call the save method, right? Because it requires us to call the is valid method before this is save method. So let's try and call the is save method. Hopefully, I'm not 100% sure, but hopefully it will not allow us, right? So if we do that, you can see it's saying you must call the is valid before calling save, right? So if we say b dot is valid, it will most probably give us a boolean, right? True or false, right? Saying if it's valid or if it's not valid, right? So we can say is valid, say b dot is valid, right? It's saying no data, right? So if we say b is equal to book serializer data is equal to data, right? So if we say b dot is valid, can say b dot is valid. So what it was saying is that to create an instance of this, you need this data and pass in your data, right? So if we call b dot is valid, right, it will say yes, it is valid, or no, it is not valid, right? So if it is valid, if it is valid right now, if you say b dot errors, right, it will return an empty object, right? But if it's not valid, it will return an object with keys and their values, right? A key value pair, which a dictionary is. Sorry, this is not an object, this is not JavaScript, this is Python. So this is a dictionary, Python dictionary, a key value pair saying the key, which is maybe the name, is not valid because it is too long or whatever reason, right? So if we because we have called this b dot is valid right now, if we say b dot save, right, we say b dot save, you can say it's saved to the database and it returned the query set instance of this of the book that we just saved, right? So if we go back, if we go to the files, right, I have a Visual Studio Code extension that can open db, that's SQLite files, right? SQLite files for me from the terminal, from the code editor, right? So if we come down here and go to the book instances, you can see that we have one book right here, right? The name is test and the description is this description that is wrongly spelled, right? So let's continue. So what can we look at? So let's create another instance of a book. Let's say data right now. Let's not give this name, right? Most probably, expectedly, is that we should pass in this name, right? But let's say we want to create an object of, we want to create a book, right? Let's say an API is making a request, our front end is making a request without the name of the book set, right? And we don't want to save it to the database because it does not follow the description of our model, right? So if we say thinking about it, okay, let me say the name is too long, right? Because if we come here, you can see that the maximum length is 30. Let's say the maximum length, the name is longer than 30, right? So let me say name, let me make this bigger still. let me say this name is equal to this long, let me make this a string, name is equal to this long. Hopefully this gets to more than 30. This should be more than 30. Hopefully it should be more than 30. And let's close it, and let's say description is anything, but description does not have a length limit, right? Because it's a text field, right? It's not a character field that needs this maximum length, right? So if we say the name of our book is this, right, and as we should know, this is longer than 30, right? So we don't expect this to pass as a book instance. We don't expect this to, when we call the isValid method, we don't expect this to return true, right? Because this is not valid, obviously, right? So if we say b is equal to, let's say instantiate b, or let's say b1, right? Let's say b1 is equal to book serializer, and say data is equal to data here. So we say we created a book instance, and say the data right now is this data that we've created, right? So let's call the b1 dot is valid, right? If we call dot is valid, you can see it's false, right? So if we, because it's false right now, if we say b1 dot errors, you can see the error is from the name field, and its value is ensure this field has no more than 30 characters, because the length is more than 30, right? So, and obviously if you say b1 dot save, it will not save, right? So it will not save. The serializer data is invalid, right, with invalid data, right? So this is it for this tutorial. Hopefully you learned something. I understand that it might be overwhelming right now, but the more we get to use, I just wanted to introduce serializers, introduce how to create them, why we need them, and these few methods. This is a valid method, save method, errors. We also have something like b1 dot error messages. I think we have error messages. b1 dot error messages. I think this one is a list. Error messages, not error messages. b1 dot error messages, right? So error messages gives us a dictionary with what is required and what is not required. So in the after this tutorial, along the end of this tutorial, we'll be having a mini project where we get to use all these things, right? So but in the next tutorial, from the next tutorial, Django APIView tutorial, we'll get to use the APIView, use the serializers, and the more we use it in code, the more we use it to build APIs, the more you get to understand it, right? So before I go, I want to introduce you to this GitHub repo. Maybe I've not done that. So this GitHub repo that contains all the source codes for this playlist, right? So if you come here and come to branches, and can see here that is reporting that this branch is not protected. I will resolve that off screen. So if you come to branches right here, you can see every video that were made in this playlist, right? You can see the functional API view. If you come here, if you click this, you can see the code for that branch, the code for that tutorial. You can come here and see class-based views. You can see the code for that. You can clone it. I think it's public also, so you can also pull it, right? You can also pull it. If you know about GitHub, you can pull it, you can push it, you can do stuff to it, right? So and that's it. And then if you see I'm working on a project, you can see serializers right here. You can see serializers. And as a Django developer, obviously if you have the dreams, you have target of taking your Django development to the next level, Django Rest Framework is very important. You can see right here, this is the code, this is an API I'm making for authentication, right? So we'll also get to this. We'll go to authentication with Django Rest Framework and things like that. So that will be it for this tutorial. And take care of yourself. Subscribe if you haven't. Like the video, share with anyone you feel find it important. And